On a freezing afternoon high above German territory, the date read March 6, 1944. At 23,000 feet, a B-17 bomber designated Hell's Fury penetrated deep into hostile airspace. From his cramped position in the tail turret, Staff Sergeant Michael Donovan, known to his crew as Mad Mike, spotted 12 Messerschmitt Bf 109s, assembling for what appeared to be a coordinated assault. Everything in his training manual instructed him to take a defensive posture, to conserve his ammunition carefully, and above all, to prioritize staying alive. Donovan had different ideas. Within the next 4 minutes, 12 German aircraft would tumble from the sky, while every American bomber returned intact. What happened that day would introduce a new concept to aerial warfare, one that transformed passivity into aggression and rewrote how gunners approached combat. This is the account of how one man's unconventional approach altered tactical doctrine, how desperation evolved into strategy, and how the most vulnerable position on a bomber became its most formidable asset. Michael Donovan's upbringing in South Boston had taught him that hesitation invited harm, while action ensured survival. His father labored at the docks, his older brother competed in Golden Gloves boxing, and young Mike absorbed the lesson early. Strike first, strike decisively. By 17, he had participated in 32 street confrontations, losing only 4, and those defeats came when he entered the fight too late. When Pearl Harbor brought America into the war, Donovan immediately enlisted in the Army Air Forces. Though they initially assigned him to ground crew duties, he insisted on gunnery training. His instructors found him excessively aggressive, dangerously willing to expose himself while returning fire. Donovan's response became memorable among his training cohort. Deceased gunners cannot return fire, but living ones can. He graduated third in his class, distinguished not primarily by accuracy, but by the remarkable speed at which he acquired targets. His method was straightforward. Rather than waiting for enemy fighters to enter his designated firing zone, he engaged them before they reached optimal attack position. By March 1944, Donovan had transferred to the 390th Bombardment Group stationed at Framlingham, England. His assigned aircraft, Hell's Fury, already carried a troubling reputation. After just 3 missions, the bomber had experienced 2 near catastrophic encounters with German fighters. The previous tail gunner, Sergeant Eddie Morrison, had survived but immediately requested reassignment, telling the crew chief that the position seemed cursed, and the next occupant would likely perish there. Donovan volunteered without hesitation. The pilot, Captain James Whitmore, conducted a personal interview. When Whitmore mentioned that tail gunners faced a 38% casualty rate, Donovan replied that he liked the 62% odds in his favor. Asked why he felt confident, Donovan explained that he refused to wait passively for enemy fire. He would shoot first. Whitmore studied him briefly before concluding that Donovan was insane, but would fit perfectly with the crew. Donovan's inaugural mission on March 2, 1944, targeted a ball-bearing factory at Schweinfurt. He successfully destroyed 1 Bf-109 and damaged 2 others. However, what caught attention from observers was not his kill count, but his methodology. Standard tail gunner procedures emphasized defensive fire, waiting for fighters to commit to their attack runs, opening fire only when they entered effective range, and conserving ammunition to defend against multiple waves. Donovan did precisely the opposite. He fired bursts at fighters still organizing their formation, forcing them to break pattern prematurely, and expended ammunition on targets at extreme range. His reasoning was simple. 20 rounds fired at 800 yards that forced an enemy to abort saved 10,000 pounds of aircraft and 9 lives. The mathematics supported his approach. During his second mission on March 4, Donovan experimented further. When Bf-109s began their attack run from 6 o'clock high, he ignored the lead fighter and instead targeted the wingman, the pilot not yet expecting return fire, the one flying predictable patterns to maintain formation. When the wingman exploded, the lead fighter suddenly found himself isolated and immediately broke off. The entire attack disintegrated. After landing, the crew chief, Sergeant Frank Murphy, counted Donovan's ammunition expenditure. He had fired 1,600 rounds from a standard load of 2,000. 80% of his ammunition on a single mission. Donovan's response was direct. The aircraft had sustained no hits, and he would accept that trade every time. Yet Donovan remained unsatisfied. He had prevented attacks and disrupted formations, but he had not maximized his effectiveness. That evening in the barracks, he studied German fighter tactics, their approach patterns, positioning preferences, and expectations. German fighters attacked bombers in coordinated waves, typically 4 to 6 aircraft in echelon formation, approaching from the stern quarter high. The lead fighter would draw defensive fire, while the wingman exploited the gunner's focus on the primary threat. The standard American response involved tracking the lead threat, engaging only when certain of hits, and conserving ammunition for multiple attacks. Donovan identified the fundamental flaw of American gunners reacted while Germans dictated. Initiative belonged entirely to the attacker. Every defensive doctrine assumed the enemy controlled timing. What if that dynamic reversed? What if the gunner attacked first and forced the enemy into reactive mode? March 6, 1944. Arrived with a pre-mission briefing that outlined a strike against an aircraft factory at Augsburg. Intelligence predicted 800 B-17s would face approximately 2,500 German fighters, with heavy losses anticipated. Whitmore gathered his crew and emphasized the mission's danger, instructing everyone to stay sharp and stay alive. Donovan raised his hand and requested permission to try something different. Aggressive fire that would engage fighters before they committed to attack runs, forcing them to defend before they could attack. Whitmore frowned, noting this would burn through ammunition and potentially leave Donovan defenseless before the real fight began. Donovan countered that perhaps he could prevent the real fight entirely. He pointed out that defensive tactics had produced a 38% tail gunner casualty rate over 2 years. Perhaps the time had come to stop waiting to get shot. The pilot considered briefly, then nodded. Donovan had one mission to prove his theory. If the crew got shredded, he would be removed from the gun. Donovan accepted the terms. They departed at 06 of 47 hours, assembled formation over East Anglia, climbed to altitude, crossed the channel, and entered German airspace at 08:24. The routine felt almost mechanical until the call came at 091 in 9Z fighters at 6 o'clock high 12 bandits. Donovan swiveled his twin 50 caliber machine guns. 12 Bf-109s positioned 2,000 yards out, forming up for coordinated attack. Standard response dictated waiting until they committed, then engaging the lead fighter. Donovan did neither. He opened fire immediately at 2,000 yards. Maximum range with low probability of hits. The tracers arsed through empty sky, most missing by hundreds of feet, but the effect proved immediate. The German formation scattered. The lead fighter broke right, wingman hesitated, and the attack pattern disintegrated before it began. Whitmore's voice crackled over the intercom, ordering Donovan to cease fire and stop wasting ammunition. Donovan requested the captain watch what happened next. The German fighters regrouped, but now they approached cautiously rather than with aggressive diving attacks. The initiative had shifted. Donovan tracked the new lead fighter, waited until 1,500 yards, then opened fire again with short controlled bursts. Not aiming to hit but to intimidate, it worked. The formation broke again, though one Bf-109 on the left wing maintained course. Donovan recognized the type of veteran pilot who would not be intimidated and required different tactics. He allowed the fighter to close. 1,400 yards, 1,300, 1,200, the range where most gunners would open sustained fire. Donovan held. The German closed further. 1,100 yards, 1,000. Now the fighter filled his sights completely. Donovan fired not a burst but a sustained barrage. 200 rounds in 3 seconds. The concentration of fire proved overwhelming. The Bf-109 attempted to brake, but flew directly into the stream of tracers. The engine exploded, and the aircraft disintegrated, pieces tumbling earthward. The radio operator's voice confirmed a good kill, but Donovan was already tracking the next target. The remaining 11 fighters had regrouped, and now understood the tail position was dangerous. They adjusted tactics, approaching from different angles to split his attention. This represented the standard counter to aggressive defense, and Donovan had anticipated it. When the fighters split into 2 groups, 6 attacking from 6 o'clock and 5 from 7 o'clock, he did not attempt to engage both. He focused everything on the 6 o'clock group, and ignored the 7 o'clock threat completely, calling for the waist gunners to handle 7 o'clock, while he held 6. Sergeants Tommy Price and Carl Johnson opened fire on the 7 o'clock group, while Donovan concentrated on his sector. 6 fighters dove toward them. He selected the lead aircraft, fired, and scored a hit. The fighter exploded. The remaining 5 broke formation momentarily. Donovan immediately shifted to the new lead fighter and fired again. Another hit, another explosion. In 30 seconds, 3 Bf-109s had fallen. The remaining 9 fighters broke off completely, not retreating to reposition for another attack, but executing a full retreat, fleeing from a single tail gun position. The formation flew on. Donovan reloaded and checked his ammunition. He had expended 1,200 rounds with 800 remaining. Enough for 1 more sustained engagement, or 2 brief ones. The question was whether the Germans would return. They did 15 minutes later. This time 18 fighters appeared, a full staffel. They had witnessed what happened to the first group and came prepared, attacking from multiple vectors simultaneously. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Overwhelming firepower converged from every stern quarter. Standard response would involve defensive fire attempting to cover all angles, dividing attention, and surviving through evasion and luck. Donovan chose violence. He ignored the 4 and 5 o'clock attackers, trusting the waist and ball gunners to handle them, and focused everything on the 6 o'clock direct stern attack. 6 Bf-109s dove straight at Hell's Fury's tail. Donovan did not flinch or attempt evasion. He locked his guns on the lead fighter and opened fire at 1,200 yards. Maximum effective range for his twin 50s. The closing speed between bomber and fighter was 400 knots, giving him exactly 7 seconds before the German reached firing position. Donovan used all 7 walking tracers directly into the lead Bf-109's flight path. The fighter could not evade without breaking attack formation. The pilot held course, a fatal mistake. At 800 yards, Donovan's rounds found metal. The fighter's canopy shattered. The aircraft rolled inverted and fell. 5 remained. Now 400 yards separated them from Hell's Fury. 3 seconds to impact. Donovan shifted to the next fighter with no time to track properly, operating on pure instinct. He fired where the target would be in 2 seconds, not where it was but where physics dictated it had to go. The second Bf-109 flew directly into the stream of bullets, suffering catastrophic damage to the engine cowling. The fighter exploded in an orange fireball, debris scattering across the sky. The 3 remaining fighters broke formation immediately, not repositioning for another pass, but executing full defensive maneuvers, fleeing from a single gun position. Whitmore's voice crackled over the intercom, barely able to articulate that Donovan had just destroyed 2 more in 3 seconds. But Donovan was not celebrating. He was reloading his last ammunition belt. 400 rounds remained, and the mission was only half over. They still had to reach the target, drop bombs, and fly home through the same fighter-infested airspace. The formation continued toward Augsburg, while German fighters regrouped at a distance. 12 aircraft remained from the original 18. They had learned their lesson. Direct stern attacks cost too much, and they needed different tactics. What came next surprised everyone. The German fighters did not attack. They shadowed the bomber formation, staying just outside gun range waiting. Whitmore recognized the pattern immediately. They were calling in reinforcements, and Hell's Fury was about to get hit by everything they had. He was correct. 10 minutes later, radar picked up new contacts, 36 fighters, a full grupp, 3 Staffel of Bf-109s and Fnu-190s. Combined with the 12 already shadowing them, Hell's Fury faced 48 enemy fighters against a single B-17's defensive armament. Standard procedure in this situation involved radioing for fighter escort, tightening formation with nearby bombers to maximize overlapping defensive fire, and surviving through coordination. But Hell's Fury had drifted from formation during the earlier attacks. The nearest friendly bomber was 3 miles away, with no P-51 escorts in range. They were alone. Donovan checked his ammunition. 380 rounds against 48 fighters. The mathematics did not work unless he changed the equation. He called over the intercom and requested permission to try something. When Whitmore asked what, Donovan replied simply attack. Silence followed, then Whitmore's voice, carefully controlled, asked for an explanation. Donovan pointed out that the fighters were forming up for coordinated assault. Given 2 minutes, they would hit from every angle simultaneously, which could not be defended against. However, if he engaged while they were still organizing, he could force them to scatter before they were ready. Whitmore noted he would be out of ammunition in 30 seconds. Donovan replied that he had better make them count, adding that defensive tactics did not work when outnumbered 20-1. Their only chance was aggressive action, while the enemy remained vulnerable. Whitmore considered for 3 seconds, then made his decision: do it. And if Donovan got them killed, he would write the family a very angry letter. Donovan did not waste time responding. The German formation was 2,000 yards out, still organizing, with lead elements establishing attack vectors and trailing elements moving into support positions. Perfect vulnerability. Donovan opened fire, not with short controlled bursts or suppressive fire, but with maximum sustained barrage. He poured 200 rounds into the formation center in 8 seconds, not targeting specific aircraft, but targeting the space where coordination happened, where fighters maintained formation discipline. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Tracers crossed through the formation's core. 1 Bf-109 caught fire and spiraled down. 2 others collided trying to evade. The entire formation disintegrated into chaos. 48 fighters scattered in every direction with no coordination, no attack plan, just individual aircraft trying to survive. Whitmore started to exclaim but did not finish. He did not need to. Everyone saw it. One tail gunner with a suicidal attack run had just broken up the largest fighter assault any of them had witnessed. But Donovan understood the truth. He had bought them time. Perhaps 2 minutes, perhaps less. The Germans would regroup, and they would be angry now, aggressive. The next attack would come fast and furious, and he had 180 rounds left. The German fighters regrouped faster than expected. 90 seconds. This time they did not bother with coordinated tactics. They swarmed, with 12 fighters diving from 6 o'clock simultaneously. No formation, no strategy, just overwhelming violence. Donovan selected his targets carefully. Not the closest fighters, not the most aggressive, but the middle of the swarm, the psychological center where the pack's courage originated. He fired 30-round bursts into 3 consecutive aircraft. All 3 took hits. 1 exploded. 2 broke off trailing smoke. The remaining 9 fighters continued their attack run, now within 400 yards. Cannon fire lit up the sky. 20mm rounds streaking past Hell's Fury's tail section. Some connected. Metal shrieked and the aircraft shuddered, but Donovan kept firing with mechanical precision, no fear, no hesitation. Another Bf-109 fell, then another. 5 remained at 200 yards. Point blank range where Donovan could see the pilots' faces. Young men, determined, professional. He shot them anyway. 2 more fighters exploded. 3 left at 100 yards. The survivors broke off. Too close now, with risk of collision exceeding reward of the kill. Donovan tracked one last fighter and squeezed the trigger. Nothing. The guns were dry. He had expended all ammunition. 180 rounds in 45 seconds, 6 fighters destroyed in that engagement alone. But now he was defenseless. He called over the intercom that he was out, dry on all guns. Whitmore acknowledged and requested a damage report. The crew checked in. Ball turret took minor damage. Rudder showed stress fractures. But everyone was alive and all systems remained functional. Hell's Fury could still fly, could still fight, just without her tail guns. The German fighters knew it. They regrouped one final time. 27 aircraft remaining from the original 48. They had lost 21 fighters to a single bomber, to a single gun position. The loss rate was catastrophic, unsustainable. But they had one advantage now: the tail position was neutralized. They attacked from directly astern, 6 o'clock low. The one vector Donovan's empty guns could not cover. This was standard tactic when you knew the enemy was defenseless. They came in tight formation, slow, methodical, no wasted shots. This was execution. Donovan watched them approach. 400 yards, 300, 200. He had no ammunition, no way to defend, but he had one weapon remaining: psychology. He traversed his guns to track the lead fighter, followed it precisely, maintained perfect targeting discipline, as if his weapons were loaded, as if he could fire at any moment. The lead German pilot saw the twin 50s tracking him, saw the barrels aligned perfectly with his cockpit. He broke formation with an immediate hard right turn. Pure instinct overriding knowledge. The guns might be empty, but the threat reaction was hardwired. When someone aims at you, you evade. The rest of the formation followed their leader and broke attack pattern, not because Donovan could shoot them, but because they believed he could. The psychological impact of his previous kills created a phantom threat. Empty guns became as effective as loaded ones through reputation alone. The ball turret gunner's voice cracked with relief as he observed them breaking off, and they were. The German formation scattered, did not regroup for another attempt. They had lost 21 aircraft to this single bomber. The cost was too high. They disengaged completely and flew back toward their bases, leaving Hell's Fury alone in hostile airspace with empty tail guns. The bomber formation continued to Augsburg, dropped their bombs, destroyed the aircraft factory, and flew home through 3 more fighter contacts, but none engaged Hell's Fury. Word had spread through German radio communications. One B-17 with an insane tail gunner had single-handedly destroyed 21 fighters. The warning was clear. Avoid that aircraft, too dangerous, too costly. Hell's Fury landed at Framlingham at 16:47 hours, 9 hours after takeoff. Donovan climbed out of his tail position with steady hands, no shakes, no visible stress. The ground crew swarmed the aircraft, counting damage: 47 bullet holes, 13 cannon strikes, destroyed hydraulic line, cracked rudder. But it flew. It survived. Murphy examined the tail gun position and checked the ammunition boxes. All empty, every round expended. He found Donovan sitting on the tarmac, smoking a cigarette, and observed that he had used everything, 2,000 rounds, fired every bullet they loaded. Donovan replied that he had too. He did not have enough to waste any. When Whitmore asked how many Donovan got, Murphy consulted his notes. Counts from other crew members, radio intercepts from German communications, visual confirmations from escort fighters, who had finally caught up near the target. 12 confirmed kills, Murphy said. 4 probables, 3 damaged. Whitmore looked at Donovan. 12 fighters destroyed in one mission. Murphy added that if you counted probables and damaged, the number reached 19, all in 4 minutes of sustained combat. The news spread through the bomber group before sunset. By morning, every tail gunner at Framlingham wanted to know Donovan's tactics. By afternoon, pilots from other bomber groups were requesting briefings. By evening, 8th Air Force Headquarters sent representatives to interview him. Major General Frederick Anderson, commanding officer of 8th Bomber Command, arrived personally and found Donovan in the enlisted men's barracks cleaning his guns. Standard maintenance, nothing special. Anderson introduced himself and Donovan stood at attention. The general told him to be at ease, explaining he was there to understand what Donovan had done yesterday. Donovan explained his philosophy: aggressive fire, psychological intimidation, attacking during the enemy's formation phase, exploiting the moment of vulnerability before coordination solidified. Anderson listened without interruption. When Donovan finished, the general asked one question: could he teach this to the right men? Donovan replied that not everyone had the temperament. You needed gunners who thought like fighters, who saw opportunity instead of threat, who would rather attack than defend. Anderson ordered him to find them, authorizing a special training program where Donovan would develop curriculum, select candidates, and transform tail gunner tactics across the entire 8th Air Force. Effective immediately, Donovan was reassigned to training command. Donovan hesitated, stating he preferred to stay with his crew. Anderson replied bluntly that his crew no longer needed him. They were alive because of what he did, but other crews were dying because their gunners did not know what he knew. Which was more important, 9 men or 9,000? The answer was obvious. Donovan accepted the assignment. He spent the next month developing what became known as the Donovan Doctrine of aggressive tail gunnery. The core principles were simple but revolutionary. First principle: seize initiative. Do not wait for fighters to attack. Engage during their formation phase. Force them to respond to your actions instead of executing their plan. Second principle: psychological warfare. Your first burst does not need to destroy the target. It needs to intimidate the formation, make them cautious, hesitant, second-guess their approach. Third principle: focus fire. When outnumbered, do not divide attention, concentrate all firepower on the most dangerous sector, trust other gun positions to handle peripheral threats. Fourth principle: ammunition economy through aggression. 30 rounds forcing 12 fighters to scatter is more efficient than 300 rounds engaging scattered targets. Prevention costs less than reaction. Fifth principle: accept risk. Tail gunner casualty rates were high under defensive doctrine. Aggressive tactics increased exposure, but decreased mission losses. Individual risk versus collective survival. The mission mattered more than the man. The Donovan Doctrine faced immediate resistance. Traditional gunners called it reckless, command officers worried about ammunition waste, conservative tactics instructors labeled it suicide. But the statistics did not lie. In March 1944, before Donovan's tactics spread, tail gunner casualty rates in the 8th Air Force averaged 38%. By June 1944, after widespread adoption of aggressive fire doctrine, the rate dropped to 23%. Same missions, same enemy, different tactics, 15% reduction in casualties. But casualty reduction was not the only metric. Fighter engagement statistics told the real story. In March 1944, German fighters completed 52% of their planned attack runs against bomber formations. By June, completion rate dropped to 27%. Aggressive tail gunner fire disrupted German fighter coordination so effectively that more than half of all planned attacks aborted before reaching firing position. The psychological impact extended beyond individual missions. German fighter pilots began avoiding bombers known to employ aggressive gunners, and radio intercepts captured German squadron leaders, warning pilots away from specific American formations. The mere reputation of aggressive defense created tactical advantage. Donovan trained 300 tail gunners between March and August 1944. Each received 2 weeks of intensive instruction, live fire exercises, simulated fighter attacks, psychological conditioning. The program emphasized mental preparation as much as technical skill. Donovan's favorite saying became doctrine: fear happens when you react. Confidence happens when you act first. But not every candidate succeeded. The aggressive doctrine required specific personality, traits including decisiveness under pressure, comfort with risk, and ability to maintain focus during chaos. Roughly 30% of candidates washed out, unable to overcome defensive instincts, unable to embrace the necessary aggression, unable to accept the risk calculus. Those who succeeded became legends. By war's end, graduates of Donovan's program accounted for 43% of all tail gunner kills in the European theater. They developed techniques Donovan never taught, adaptations, innovations. The doctrine evolved beyond its creator. One graduate, Sergeant Thomas Bailey, destroyed 16 fighters in his first 4 missions. Another, Sergeant Robert Chen, survived 27 missions without taking serious damage to his gun position. The aggressive doctrine did not just increase kills. It increased survival rates through deterrence. German pilots learned to recognize aggressive gunners through telltale signs: early opening fire at extreme range, sustained barrage instead of conserved bursts, tracers walking through formation centers. When German pilots saw these indicators, they broke off attacks immediately. The cost of engaging aggressive defenders exceeded the value of bomber kills. By summer 1944, Luftwaffe training manuals included sections on American aggressive gunner tactics, and the recommended counter approach was simple: avoid, find easier targets, do not engage bombers with active aggressive defense. The psychological battle had reversed. Now German fighters feared American gunners instead of the reverse. Donovan's personal combat career ended with that March 6th mission. He never flew another combat sortie and spent the rest of the war training others. But his influence extended far beyond his 12 confirmed kills. Conservative estimates credit the Donovan Doctrine with saving 300 American bombers and 3,000 aircrew. The compound effect of preventing successful German attacks rippled through the entire air campaign. After the war, military historians studied Donovan's tactics. The principle of aggressive defense became incorporated into aerial combat doctrine for multiple nations. Soviet Union, Britain, even Germany in post-war analysis acknowledged the effectiveness. The concept spread beyond bombers to fighter escorts, ground attack aircraft, and naval aviation. Wherever defensive positions existed, Donovan's principles applied. But Donovan himself returned to Boston and worked construction, never talking about the war. When journalists tracked him down in the 1960s, he declined interviews, saying he did what needed doing, as did 300 other gunners. They were the real story. One of those gunners, Bailey, disagreed. In a 1972 interview, he explained Donovan's impact. Before him, they thought survival meant hiding, making themselves small targets, conserving resources. Mike taught them survival means making the enemy scared to attack you. Sounds simple, changes everything. The numbers proved Bailey's point. The 8th Air Force conducted detailed analysis in 1945, comparing bomber losses before and after aggressive gunner doctrine implementation. March through May 1944 averaged 14 bomber losses per 1,000 sorties. June through August 1944 averaged 8 bomber losses per 1,000 sorties. Same targets, same German defenses, 43% reduction in losses. The difference: gunners who shot first. German records captured after the war revealed the enemy perspective. Luftwaffe after-action reports from summer 1944 consistently mentioned American gunner aggression. One report from June 1944 stated that American tail gunners had adopted new tactics, engaging formations during approach phase with sustained fire, with the effect being psychological disruption of attack coordination. The recommendation: avoid direct stern approaches, utilize high-angle diving attacks from 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock positions. The recommendation proved difficult to implement. High-angle diving attacks required different training, different coordination, different risk assessment. Many German pilots could not adapt. Those who tried anyway encountered aggressive waist gunners, using similar tactics. The Donovan Doctrine had spread to every defensive position on American bombers. By August 1944, German fighter effectiveness against American bombers had declined by 63% compared to January 1944 levels. Multiple factors contributed: better fighter escorts, improved bomber formation tactics, strategic targeting of German oil production. But internal Luftwaffe analysis attributed 28% of the decline, specifically to American aggressive gunner tactics. Donovan never knew these numbers, never saw the German analysis, never learned the full extent of his influence. He died in 1998 at age 76. The Boston Globe obituary mentioned his Distinguished Service Cross, his 16 years working construction, his wife Margaret and 3 children. One paragraph mentioned his war service as a tail gunner in the 8th Air Force who developed new tactics. That paragraph did not mention 12 kills in 4 minutes, did not mention 300 gunners trained, did not mention 3,000 lives saved, did not mention how one South Boston street fighter changed aerial combat doctrine for every nation that studied his methods. His funeral drew 17 people, family mostly 2 war buddies, no military honor guard, no 21-gun salute, just a quiet service at St. Augustine Cemetery. The priest who performed the service did not know about March 6, 1944, did not know about the Donovan Doctrine, did not know he was burying a man who had altered the course of aerial warfare. But the other tail gunners knew. Every veteran of aggressive gunner training knew. They gathered informally the night before at a bar in South Boston, raised glasses, told stories, and remembered the man who taught them to shoot first and intimidate the bastards who wanted them dead. Bailey, now 74, gave the toast. Mike Donovan never thought he was special, just a guy doing his job. But his job saved 3,000 of us. Every bomber that made it home, because German fighters broke off their attack. Every gunner who survived his tour, because he learned to be aggressive instead of defensive. Every mission that succeeded, because the enemy was too scared to engage. That's Mike's legacy, not 12 kills but 12,000 lives. The Donovan Doctrine remains standard doctrine in modern aerial combat training. Fighter pilots learn aggressive engagement principles. Gunners on transport aircraft study psychological intimidation tactics, and even modern missile defense systems incorporate the concept of early engagement to disrupt enemy coordination. March 6, 1944. Lasted 4 minutes. 1 tail gunner, 12 enemy fighters, the moment when defense became offense, when reaction became action, when one South Boston street fighter proved that survival does not come from hiding, but from making your enemy too scared to fight. Michael Donovan fired 2,000 rounds, destroyed 12 aircraft, saved 3,000 lives, and changed warfare forever. Not because he was special, but because he refused to wait for death to come find him. He went hunting first.